Today, Live March 10, 2021. Live World News Headlines. Why doesn't the United States punish MBS more severely for Khashoggi's murder? Certainly, it would be satisfying to sanction Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for his role in the torture and murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. It would be satisfying, moreover, to cut all ties with Saudi Arabia, a tyrannical kingdom hostile to our values and whose oil is no longer even necessary for us. So it was quite demoralizing to find that President Joe Biden was not doing either one. Neither, even after its Director of National Intelligence released a report on Friday, February 25, declassified from a much more comprehensive file, concluding that MBS, the prince's nickname, approved an operation to capture or kill Khashoggi and exercise full control over the elite guard who carried out this crime. But faced with reality, Biden had no choice but to not penalize the prince personally. First of all, such a measure would have had little effect. Then it would only have entangled the United States more in the local Byzantine policies of the Middle East, when we should be extricating ourselves from them. Finally, what Biden has done, in response to the intelligence report and other Saudi crimes, is more punitive than any action any U.S. president has ever taken against the royal family, and will carry more consequences than a personal reprimand addressed to the Crown Prince would have been. Diplomatic relations. Biden stopped sending Saudi Arabia the offensive weapons it was using to kill the Houthi rebels in Yemen. He halted the delivery of all arms, including defensive ones, worth billions of dollars, purchased by Saudi Arabia from the United States pending a review, not just of every arms sale, but of the entire relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Until today, the Saudis had carte blanche for just about all American weapons except nuclear weapons. Biden has also banned 76 Saudi officials involved in Khashoggi's murder and their families from entering the United States. And he imposed further sanctions on the number 2 in Saudi intelligence who saw his assets frozen. All of this is remarkable, and not just in comparison to President Donald Trump, who refused to lift a finger at any Saudi Arabian and blocked the release of a CIA report on Khashoggi's murder. All previous presidents have treated Saudi officials with a grain of salt, mainly so they could take advantage of their abundance of oil wells. But still, shouldn't it have at least been freezing the assets of the Crown Prince in the United States? According to the Washington Post, Biden and his advisors considered it but concluded that it was impossible to separate the prince's holdings from those of the Saudi state because the two are roughly the same. The Saudis need us more than we need them. Besides the pragmatic side, it's worth noting how unusual, if not unheard of, it would have been to sanction MBS in person. The same intelligence agencies that found the Crown Prince to be guilty of approving Khashoggi's murder also concluded that Russian President Vladimir Putin personally interfered in our 2016 election and had several of his opponents poisoned. Foreign. The latest being Alexei Navalny. Several American presidents, including, at the beginning of March, Biden, imposed sanctions on the Russian government and on specific Russian officials. However, they did not go so far as to sanction Putin himself. There is a reason. In general, the United States does not sanction the heads of state of sovereign nations with which it has diplomatic relations. And that's valid for most other countries, by the way. It is a principle whose roots go back to the Westphalian Treaties of 1648. To hell with the prince. What would have happened if Biden had sanctioned the Crown Prince? Some argue that the prince's father, the 85-year-old Saudi king, was warned that, contrary to what he has been preparing for a long time, he simply could not make MBS his successor, except to take the risk of severing all relations with the main ally and benefactor of the kingdom, the United States. It is extremely implausible. What is true, as we often hear these days, is that the Saudis need us more than we need them, but they don't need us that much. Of course, they would not prefer to go and forge primary ties elsewhere, but they could and would if necessary. The king is not going to dismiss MBS. For several reasons, the least of which is that MBS is already in power and it's been going on for a while. During Obama's presidency, I heard stories, since confirmed, of 2 senior U.S. officials who on 2 separate occasions have met King Salman in his palace. As he spoke, the king stared at a frame on his desk. In one corner, the Crown Prince, seated at a desk, was typing diligently on a computer. The Americans quickly realized what was going on. MBS was typing out what the king was to say. The frame was actually a computer screen and the ruler only read aloud the Crown Prince's script. This is the situation, and Biden, who no doubt knows these stories, must have had them in mind when considering the possibilities open to him. If Saudi Arabia were an insignificant country, none of this would be a problem. This presumptuous prince killed a journalist who, although a Saudi citizen, was resident on American soil and worked for the Washington Post, an American newspaper. To hell with the prince. But Biden, like any other president, at least had to take into account that Saudi Arabia remains an inescapable bulwark against Iranian expansion. Plays a critical buffer role for Israeli security, is a key player in global oil markets, even though the United States is energy independent, and a major player in the sharing of intelligence regarding the region, and that it constitutes a valuable air base. If the geopolitical situation starts to change to the point where all of these things are no longer important, or if an American president decides that they are no longer important, then yes, to hell with the prince. And to some extent, to hell with the prince, indeed. Whatever Biden did or didn't do, he clearly downgraded Saudi Arabia's status to Washington's priorities, which, again, is a first for an American president. It is a gross exaggeration to claim, as some critics of Biden have done, that this failure to sanction MBS sends to the royal family and tyrants of all kinds that they can get away with under any circumstances. Since Biden took office, the Saudi government has agreed to lift its embargo on humanitarian aid in Yemen. He freed 2 imprisoned Saudi Americans and released Luhayn al-Hathlal, Saudi feminist dissident jailed since 2018. Now that Biden has announced that he will continue to deal with the real Saudi leader, maybe the latter will respond. Perhaps. A small break of good quality? None of this is taken for granted. Both the Crown Prince and the new American president will be scrutinized very closely, one by the other, but also by the rest of the world, in particular by their own citizens. We will see if the Saudis cooperate, as they have assured, with Tim Lenderking, the American envoy sent by Biden to end the war in Yemen. We'll see if anything happens to other Saudi dissidents notoriously in MBS's sights, and we'll see what Biden does if so. We'll see what happens to the stalled flow of U.S. arms sales to Saudi Arabia, if one part actually dries up, a sign of a genuine repositioning of our relations, or if it resumes quietly after a small break of good quality. We'll see what happens when Biden holds an international summit on one issue or another, if MBS is treated a little less formally than usual, if he's invited, or if the hugs and kisses resume. Biden said human rights will be at the forefront of U.S. foreign policy. Like most presidents who make this kind of announcement at the start of their mandate, he had time to realize. He had known it for a long time, moreover, that sometimes it is necessary to set them back a little bit. We'll see if they get pushed back too far. Don't forget to comment below with your common sense and subscribe to your podcast. This helps bring the podcast to life and grow it. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We can't wait to continue this adventure with you. Support us on PayPal. Thank you very much and enjoy listening.